Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar. My name is Michael Stelmach and I'm with Tivity. I'm here to talk to you about a topic that's been the focus of my career for the past decade and one that I think is a very exciting area of project and organizational management. It is very mature on paper, but in my opinion still has a very long way to go in practice. I want to talk to you today about identifying your best portfolio of projects. Sounds like a straightforward thing, right? It's actually a pretty broad topic and could be interpreted and has been interpreted in many different ways. Some people just take a list of all their projects, provided they can even put one together. And then what? They rank them by cost, by ROI, alphabetically. Why even bother with it? What are some of the benefits of prioritizing projects? Today's session will focus on some of these topics and should give you a pretty good overview of what project prioritization is, why it's valuable, and how we can use technology to help enable the prioritization process. I'd like to share a couple of quotes with you as part of this presentation. One is by a famous German writer, Johann Goethe, who said, "Things that matter most must never be at the mercy of things that matter least." While this certainly applies in all aspects of our lives, especially in the busy modern world that we live in today, where information is flying at us from all directions, and there are ever-increasing demands on our personal and work time, it really resonates with me when it comes to talking about project portfolio management and prioritizing work and projects. As we think about the definition of what a project is, we can look at the classic PMI definition, which states that a project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result, and that has a defined beginning and end, and defined scope and resources. If we look at it in a more general term, a project can also be looked at as an investment that an organization is making in order to capitalize on an opportunity. Now, those opportunities are all around us, and organizations every day are challenged with determining which ones to pursue. This could be something technology related, upgrading an email system, or opening a new office location, or transforming a business process, or decommissioning an old asset that's no longer in use. Whatever it might be, the organization is making an investment. And generally, profit-seeking businesses expect return from their investments. They don't always have to be financial returns, but for the most part, the focus is on making sure that our investments pay back in a way that improves the business in some shape or form. Whether it's competitive advantage, boosting employee satisfaction, increasing revenue, decreasing costs. When we invest, we want to make sure that we're investing in the right things that will provide us with the return that we're expecting or hoping for. And we certainly want to make sure that those investments are not compromised by anything less important. There is another good quote by Peter Drucker, who was a famous management consultant and is widely known for his influence on the modern management discipline. He developed the concept of management by objectives and is considered by some to be the founder of modern management. He had a great quote that says, "There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently something which should not be done at all." This one's really interesting and certainly something that I've seen many customers run into that I've worked with over the years. There are so many organizations that invest a ton of resources into their execution capabilities while failing to put in place measures that channel that capability in a way that provides the highest return for their business. I'm sure many of you have seen projects that have gone really well from an execution perspective, but have brought no or little value to the business in the end. It's incredibly common, and it's amazing how much gets invested into these efforts while other more important initiatives sit on the sidelines or get derailed. The point is, being good at delivering projects is not enough. We need to make sure we're delivering the right projects. Projects that ultimately help move our business in the direction of our strategy, whatever that strategy might be. So as we think about situations where we may not be effective at prioritizing, there are certain signs of trouble that are easily observed by asking certain questions. Now, the list of these can be long. I've tried to distill it to a very simple, generic list that should hopefully resonate with the audience. These are more easily spotted than others, and that's why they're listed here. The first one is no centrally defined prioritization criteria. I underline centrally here for a reason. This is what I see in virtually every organization I work with. Each department has their own objectives. Now, that's not a bad thing at all. In fact, each department is there to achieve outcomes that are specific to their mission, that is part of a greater organization. And at the end of the day, they don't care about what others are doing. Engineering is focused on designing products. They're not too worried about what IT is up to until they need something for their project that only IT can provide. Then we get into the classic issue of mixed priorities and misaligned objectives. I am sure many of you have experienced the situation while managing or being part of a project. It's pretty classic where, as an example, R&D decides to build a new test lab. They know it will require some sort of an infrastructure component. They come to IT for help. IT says that it's priority 100 on their list, and all of a sudden this lab that R&D thought they would get this year is 2 years out at best. And even that's hard to predict. Then you have everybody running around with their hair on fire, escalating to executives, and getting into all sorts of political and emotional struggles, which is the second point on this list. All of a sudden, decisions are made in the context of a crisis rather than something that was going to be planned proactively and addressed in a proactive manner. How does it usually end? Some executive usually comes in and says that this is also important and just needs to happen along with all other top priority urgent things. This brings us to our third point. Everything is top priority. If everything is important in your organization, something is wrong with your prioritization process. The reality is there are never enough resources to accomplish everything we want to accomplish. Every organization out there in the world has constraints. Nobody has unlimited budget and unlimited resources. If everything is top priority, things will not get done, and we won't know whether those things were important or not unless we have some sort of a formal, disciplined approach to prioritizing. So back to our story, by the time this is all sorted out, R&D changed their approach and either outsourced the IT work or just scrapped the project, which makes it obsolete or irrelevant. Somebody might have forgotten to tell IT, who is now working on something that nobody needs anymore. Now, it might sound like an extreme example, but I've seen it too many times to count, both as a consultant and a manager. It's a very real situation. These signs of trouble typically exist in virtually any business out there to varying degrees of impact. And if you're seeing these in your organization, there is probably room for improvement. So who cares? What does it all amount to? Why bother to even care and be worried about these signs of trouble? In 2009, the Standish Group analyzed data on more than 50,000 projects across 1,000 organizations. And they found pretty interesting results that are probably not surprising. They found that only 32% of projects are considered to be successful when it comes to achieving desired business value and outcomes. This is not about just whether a project came in on time and under budget. This is about whether it actually delivered value to the business and whether the business has or will see a return on their investment. Now, I know many other analysts and PMI have done studies on this, and the numbers may vary, but overall, they pretty much tell the same story, which is most projects fail. Now, is PPM and project prioritization the holy grail of project success? Will ensure that we get 100% success rate on all projects? Absolutely not. There are tons of different inputs and influences on this process and the success and outcome of projects. but adopting and embracing it and ensuring that it's ingrained into key aspects of your business operations will absolutely make a difference. I've seen it happen. I've been part of making it happen many times, and I've seen the results firsthand. It makes an enormous difference for organizations that are willing to commit the time and the discipline to making sure that they execute on their strategy in a predictable and structured manner and create feedback loops between the strategy and the execution piece to ensure that things stay on track and stay relevant. The benefits of PPM are not just financial. They contribute to a better workplace culture, less stress for people that work there, and ultimately it just leads to higher productivity, more committed and engaged employee, and ultimately better business results, which is what this thing is all about to begin with. So what are some of the benefits of having a good project prioritization and optimization model, both qualitative and quantitative? I like to keep this list very simple and distill it down to these three basic questions. When I work with customers, we strive to get them to a place where they can reliably, using good data, good process, answer these three questions. If you can answer these today with a reasonable level of confidence, you've achieved great success in this area and are ahead of most organizations out there. So the first question is, are we doing the right things? Pretty simple, right? Are we able to answer this question with a reasonable level of confidence? Out of everything that we're doing in our organization today, are these things the right things to do based on the objectives of our business, based on our current situation out there in the market, based on who we're competing with, and what we're trying to achieve as a business? Answering this question is not always as easy as it seems, but this is something that organizations should strive for. The next one is interesting and usually leads to pretty interesting discussions and different answers. Are we doing enough of the right things? So you may remember that I mentioned earlier that projects are investments that an organization is making in hopes to capitalize on an opportunity. When you invest and expect a certain level of return, you have to invest enough to get that desired return. If you're trying to enter a new market or a new geography, how do you know whether you're investing enough into marketing, into your local presence, into offices and sales, and anything else that you need in order to establish yourself there? Companies struggle for years trying to break into new areas without knowing where they're falling short. Having a mechanism to help us measure this and ensure that we're doing enough of the right things to get the outcomes that we're looking for can make a dramatic difference in our business. Again, answering this question with confidence really sets apart organizations who are good at this versus not so good at this. And of course, the last one, as the quote by Peter Drucker said, there is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which not be done at all. We want to make sure that the right things are getting done right. We can be stellar at strategy, but also we need to ensure that we're executing. And this, of course, is where project management discipline plays an essential role. Prioritization cannot be successful without solid delivery. So again, to sum it up, if you're able to answer these questions with a reasonable level of confidence, you're definitely ahead of the curve. If there is a struggle there is probably work to be done to improve your project portfolio and prioritization process. So we've talked about a ton of how awesome PPM is and how crappy things can be if you don't have it in place. What does a good process look like? How do we prioritize project? And how does this all come together between aligning our strategy with our execution, establishing feedback loops and mechanisms to make sure that our strategy is informed by what's happening at our execution level? There are a ton of moving pieces to all this. I've worked with a large number of companies, both large and small, over the years, implementing these processes both as a consultant and being on the inside. And one thing I can say is that no amount of slides or diagrams will do justice to the amount of effort and discipline that it takes to be good at this. There are really a lot of different components and pieces that have to come together from a cultural perspective, from a process perspective, and from a tool perspective to really make this successful. It takes time, it takes effort, and it also depends on your level of maturity of where you are today and your ambitions of where you want to be in the future. This is where one size rarely fits all, and while there is a common framework and methodology to it, each organization should adopt this based on their own pain points, style, and requirements. But overall, we see these components here as being essential to a successful process. There are two main work streams to this. One is the portfolio work stream that really focuses on capturing demand, defining it or classifying this demand, going through a certain level of planning to flesh out details and to basically understand and get enough information to make a decision as to whether this particular idea or proposal is something that our organization should be investing into. So once we've captured, defined, and planned to the right level of detail, and that could vary for every business and it could also vary by the type and size of initiative, we would use that information to select, basically make a decision as to whether we should or should not be doing this particular activity. We should prioritize it within the context of the broader portfolio, and we should optimize it, which is basically using constraints and applying those to our overall portfolio to get the most business value out of the work that we're doing. As things are in flight and being executed, we also want to track actuals and track the benefits of our work. And that information is being fed by our execution process, which drops us down to the project management layer of this, where once something is approved, it then goes through the standard project management cycle, whatever that is defined by your organization, where we initiate a project, we plan it at the level of detail that's needed to execute it properly. The execution process then informs our portfolio decision makers in terms of our actual spend and our status to make sure that things are still on track, and we use that information in our prioritization and optimization exercises. And then we go to the close phase, which ideally also sets us up for tracking benefits along the way to make sure that the ROI we expected is actually something that we will achieve as part of delivering this project and being successful with it. So how do we get there? So this is an oversimplification. Each one of these is a work stream in itself and requires quite a bit of process work to get good at. This also shows us a way to break it down into manageable pieces. Each one has different stakeholders providing input and participating. Some may never interact directly, although it's good to have a core team, usually the PMO or someone who will be in charge of the end-to-end process, and just make sure that everybody marches to the same rhythm as this process is kicked off and is established. So the first one is defining the prioritization criteria. If we're going to prioritize things, we need to know what the criteria is and have it agreed and bought into by everybody who's involved. This involves engaging the executive team to come together and agree on how we will prioritize things in a way that works for everyone and ideally removes politics and emotion from those discussions to the extent possible. One of the key things we want to accomplish is alignment between our strategy and our execution. If we're running a successful, growing, and ambitious business, there will always be more demand than supply. That's just the nature of things, and that's healthy. So part of the exercise here is pure economics. How do we ensure that we use our capacity to achieve the maximum return on our investment? Some of these things we do is to make sure that we have clearly formulated and accepted business objectives or business drivers, as some people call them, These are usually things like growing revenue or reducing costs or improving productivity or reducing risk or achieving compliance and so on. Once these are defined, some organizations will choose to rank the importance of these drivers regularly. So I'm sure everybody remembers the Y2K bug madness in the late 90s. That was a big thing for pretty much every organization out there. If we looked at the list of priorities and business objectives back then, most businesses would probably list Y2K readiness and compliance as one of their top objectives. And it showed too, because I'm sure as everybody remembers, Y2K ended up being pretty much a non-event. Right after that, priorities are different, right? Things change all the time. Part of this process is to ensure a continuous review of our priorities and our objectives, and reprioritizing these based on the environment that we happen to find ourselves in today. The next one is calculating capacity. The main one here is usually people. People are generally the most expensive and the most constrained resource in most organizations. Getting this information and having a way to keep it current is essential to the success of the overall process here. We will likely want to know our capacity by specific department or by product line or skill, team, competency, role, and so on, whatever makes sense for your business. This process involves resource managers mostly, as well as help from the project management community. Capacity could also include things like facilities, equipment, materials. Just depends on the type of business you're running. All of this should also be captured in order to support our analysis step below. The next piece here is understanding your demand. This is where both project and resource managers play a key role. We know that not all work in an organization is project work. We have operational or keeping the lights on or ad hoc work that requires a big part of our overall capacity. This is where the process will rely on project and resource managers to forecast demand for specific roles or skills that they're planning to use for their project and non-project work. This is also where we try and not forget that people have vacations, holidays, unplanned sick time. All of this decreases our overall capacity, and we need to have an accurate picture of that in order to have reliable and accurate planning. Accounting for this step up front and including this information into our model just helps us avoid surprises and disappointments down the road when it comes to executing. The next piece here is analyzing the portfolio. This is where all of these data points and this information comes together and where the fun really starts. So the analysis can take many shapes and forms, and once again, it'll depend on the type of business you're running and what objectives you're trying to achieve. Generally, we will want to look at how our projects align to our strategy first, and then apply constraints that we've come up with based on the work we did in understanding the capacity and the demand against the overall list. This will tell us where we have gaps in capacity and will really allow the management team to make decisions on adding capacity or constraining demand. It's an equation and a balancing act. And this part, if done right, will take the emotions and the political games out of the decision-making process and really help propel the business forward. And of course, the last piece here is once all of this has been identified, is to make sure that we implement a way to be able to repeat this process regularly. So some examples in terms of what this could look like using technology. Now, Tivity is a Microsoft partner, and we consider the Microsoft Project Online solution to be one of the best in the market when it comes to supporting portfolio analysis at varying levels of complexity. It's not the only tool out there, but it's certainly one of the best that I've seen, and I've personally worked with it over the years and have found it to be very effective when it comes to supporting the analytics and the level of rigor that is required for companies to make decisions and to execute properly. So here we see an example screen. This is right out of Project Online, where we can actually look at how projects align to business drivers, right? And Project Online allows us to align projects and assess the impacts of those projects on business drivers, ranging from no impact at all to extreme. And this is a simple matrix that we just click through and complete. This could be done at the idea phase by the requester. This can also be validated and overwritten by the PMO and the decision makers. But ultimately what it results in is a prioritized list of projects based on the value that they're delivering, based on the alignment to the business drivers. So this is not simply a ranked list based on cost or alphabetical or anything like that. It's truly a calculation of the value of each project when it comes to supporting the objectives of the business. And once we have this list defined, we can now apply certain constraints and get an idea of analysis such as resource capacity, for example. So the tool is actually able to pull in all of the information from a central resource pool and allow us to quickly see how our demand compares against our supply, and also quickly highlight bottlenecks that we are going to face in a particular time period depending on that demand. And this is a key piece of the analysis that is very important, because right away, as the screen is showing me here, I have certain over allocations during certain months for my business analysts, for my DBAs, developers, and so on. It looks like the only people who are available for work are project managers. The rest of the roles are constrained at one point or another. This is right away a very helpful red flag for me to go and drill down into and analyze where this demand is exceeding my capacity, and then using that information to make some decisions, whether I push certain things out into the future and reschedule work, whether I eliminate certain projects or put them on hold or cancel them, or whether I go hire more people to increase my capacity so they can actually deliver on the work that is being requested of me. Here is another example of a dashboard that shows me a management view of my portfolio. I can quickly see here how I'm doing on the overall cost against KPIs that I can preset in advance. How am I doing on the overall ROI? Where I am in terms of level of risk. And also I can have quick glances into my alignment. So here is a portfolio strategic bubble chart example on the bottom left there that's showing me my ROI versus my risk. And I can quickly tell here that I have projects that are very high risk and low ROI, as we can tell here by this bubble to the right and the bottom. I also have some projects that are low risk and relatively high ROI. So the sweet spot here for me, of course, is the top left quadrant of this chart. If I don't have too many projects there, then there is something wrong with the alignment. And we can make decisions on this then to understand why we are taking on so much risk as an organization for so little return. So these analytics can become very powerful very, very quickly if we apply the rigor in the process. Another one here is project ROI by project. I can quickly drill down and see which ones are giving me the return on my investments and which ones aren't, just based on the color coding of each project. Here is another example of business value versus risk. And then the bubble size is the project cost. So I can see here that I actually only have one high value, low risk, and relatively reasonable cost project in my entire portfolio. And I have a lot of others that are trending to the high risk area and are not necessarily delivering high value. And they're consuming quite a bit of cost. So this alone here can be very powerful for management to take a look at and right away be able to make some decisions on it. There are many other examples of how Project Online and the Microsoft stack overall can be used to support the analysis. And we can get into further details. You can also check out some of the other webinars we have on this topic that get into a little bit more detail around this. So how do we actually make it happen? There are certain things that are key to a successful rollout of project and portfolio prioritization process. The first one is buy-in and sponsorship. The organization needs to want to do this first and foremost. There should be desire and a sense of urgency and a sense of importance and value of implementing a prioritization process with the right level of executive engagement and sponsorship. Without it, most implementations of this nature fail. So once we have buy-in and sponsorship, we also need to recognize that this will take time and effort. Now, this is not something that happens overnight. Implementing a tool alone will not solve the problem. You also have to go through the organizational cultural change, through process improvement, and instilling this in the rhythm of the business overall. And that does take time and it does take effort. Willingness to change kind of goes along with buy-in and sponsorship, but really is important. The point of this exercise is to introduce change in the organization. Things will change. They have to change in order for us to improve. That's just the nature of things. So the willingness to do it and the resolve to do it are absolutely essential and key to this. Hiring expert help is not to be undervalued, and I might be a bit biased here, but I have seen over the years that somebody bringing in someone who has done this before, who understands the pitfalls, understands the potential risks and landmines, and can help you navigate and avoid those is really a huge value add to the organization and will just increase your odds and chances of success with this. Another element is technology, not to be underestimated. As we've seen through some examples just now, there are some very powerful tools out there that can really help us improve and automate and get the right level of insights and analysis that goes into an efficient and effective portfolio and prioritization process. There is a lot of data and a lot of number crunching that goes with these analyses, and having a tool that can cope with that and can take the guesswork out of it and make it easier for you is something that really helps. Now again, the tool alone will not solve the problem, but in conjunction with a good process and the willingness of the organization to buy in and change, technology can really help accelerate the results you will see out of this. Starting small is another area where I think a lot of organizations can potentially fail, right? We want to start small with these initiatives. We don't want to boil the ocean all at once. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. These are complex initiatives, and keeping it simple at first, starting small, getting some successes initially will go a long way towards making sure that over the long run you have a success. We work all the time with organizations and helping them build roadmaps for establishing PPM processes and then evolving the maturity of that based on the organizational needs and objectives. Putting the time and effort and discipline into developing such roadmaps, and starting small and taking small steps to first crawl and then walk and then run will make a huge difference, and something that we highly recommend. And that's really what it takes to make it happen. We do this all the time with customers, and if you have any questions or would like to follow up, we have a team of folks that can really help you improve and really help you get going with this. With that, I want to thank you for your time. I hope you found this webinar useful. You can learn more about Tivity as well as Microsoft's Project Online solution by going to our website. It's tivity.com or project-online.com, and feel free to get in touch. We'd love to talk to you more about how we can help your organization achieve your objectives. Thank you for your time and attention, and have a great day.